I'm Laura Mazzola from Fondazione Politecnico, and for this hour I will try to share at my best the webinar itself. Today,
good morning, Laura.
Good morning, Daniele. Before starting, I would like to share with you the contents of the slide that you can see on your screen. There are a few rules to make the webinar the best as possible. First of all, I would like you to switch off your microphone and your video so that we can better share the presentation and the time. And for the question and answer, I kindly ask you to use the chat function, defining or using and putting the name of the speaker and the question that you would like to make to the speaker itself. All the questions will be answered at the end of the webinar by the speakers, so that you have to wait at the end of the webinar to know the answer of them. I would like to start, and the first part of the webinar is a short opening. In the short opening, you will receive a warm welcome from the city of Milan, which is the leader of this project. And then you will receive some information of the funding program that is behind the SOUL project itself. So let's start. I give the floor to Angelo Pascale from the city of Milan that will give you the right welcome to this event.
Thank you, Laura, and good morning, everybody. Hi to all some friends we have and I know. Let's say that the city of Milan is a core partner of this EIT. And because we believe that urban mobility is a topic strategic for cities and their citizens, and we are core partners since the beginning of this adventure. And we are convinced that urban mobility could reshape the way citizens live their cities, and citizens could try to change their behavior. For example, trying to live without their own car parked under their home. But what had convinced Milan to participate to the urban mobility, to the KIC urban mobility, is the innovative profile of the KIC itself and the participation of the many other cities, so different each other, but with the common issue to live better in urban space. And under this point of view, we really believe that urban mobility is a strategic asset. Let's say that the present pandemic has had an hard lesson for cities, a new challenge cities have to face with. Only innovation and smart solutions could provide the right answer to this kind of issues that are going to change our habits forever. According to this, I believe that a smart platform like SOUL is the right answer to improve mobility hub in which Milan is mostly engaged. So I finish here my introduction. I say goodbye and hope you have a very nice session. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Angelo. And now we can move further with the opening and with this presentation that I share with you. I hope you can see it clearly and you can hear me clearly. I would like to give you a context of the development of this project. This project is funded by the EIT Urban Mobility, which is a brand new community that belongs to the European Institution of Innovation and Technology. This European Institution of Innovation and Technology, that briefly is mentioned as EIT, is an European body that has been created with the focus on the creation of big community of stakeholders, universities, customers and users to foster innovation inside the different sector. And so the idea is to sustain a process that goes from student to product to customer itself. In the specific, DAT urban mobility has an important goal, which is the one to make our cities more livable, to give back to the citizens spaces. And that can be achieved thanks to different actions that range from improvement in multimodal transport to the definition of green and human-friendly urban environment. And inside this context, SOUL project has been developed by a public-private partnership that has been able to drive a systemic solution for cities. We have discussed yesterday, and if you want, you will be able to find the recorded video of yesterday's webinar. Starting from a city's need, bringing together all key stakeholder and knowledge in order to provide a product which is able to simulate behavioral change. As I was saying, SOUL, which is an acronym for Smart Mobility Hub Platform, is a project where cities are the key players. Cities, and in the specific 3 big cities that are the city of Milan, the city of Barcelona, and the city of Eindhoven, has put on the table a question that the consortium of SOUL has tried to answer to. So how can that exploitation enable future urban mobility system to be more collaborative, user-centered, eco-efficient, and safe? And in this year of work, what has been done is the development of a GSS able to answer to this point. What you will see during this webinar is how cities see the smart mobility apps, which are the KPIs related to that, which are the needs and which are the barriers, because thanks to the contribution of the industrial partner and mainly by Skoda, it was possible to point out the big barriers that are behind the implementation of smart mobility apps. I won't stall any more time to the people that have done the hard work and to the cities, because today the word is to the cities. And so I give the floor to the city of Eindhoven with Niels Biersma that will describe you the first point that you have to tackle when you want to implement and optimize a smart mobility app, the KPI framework that you have to follow. So Niels, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Laura. Can you all hear me? Great. I'll try to share my. Just a moment. So can you see my screen?
Okay.
Yes. That's great. Okay, so thank you, Laura, for the introduction. I'm very happy on the way you pronounce my name. It's almost like if you're Dutch. So that's a good start. Well, welcome you. Welcome for you all. I would like to tell you something about the KPIs that we have developed in the SOUL project as part of the work package that we did. That was a bit too fast. But first, let me start by why does SOUL actually need KPIs? Because you might think that that is something that is a bit related to other subjects. Well, for one thing, you could use KPIs to monitor the use of the hub, but also you could use them to measure the progress of all the mobility movements that are going through the hub towards the sustainable urban mobility goals. Also, you could use it to see what is actually happening real time in the hub and see how it can help you to solve the problems. For instance, are you still on target to realize your goals? And of course, you can use them to analyze patterns in the data that you see and you gather over time. Now, also, there's the question of the operation in the hubs. And you might want to see some services doing better, actually focus on some other way of performance, and tackle new opportunities that the data and the KPIs show you. So there's a lot of different reasons to actually focus on KPIs on the hubs. Now, some of you might not exactly be aware of what KPIs are. So I put some examples here next to the hub that is almost finished in Eindhoven now. Actually, it is finished, but it's not formally open yet because of the pandemic. We're working on that. So there are in-process KPIs and there are output KPIs. The main difference between them, and you can see some examples in the on the screen, is that the process KPIs tell something about what needs to be, what you are doing in order to reach a certain goal, and the output KPIs actually measure the goal. So there's two really distinct ways of looking at KPIs. And what we did for the SOUL project is we actually mapped all the sustainable urban mobility goals that we could find of all the cities, but also the other partners. They brought in their own KPIs and their goals, and we tried to map them on the using of hubs. So this is where we start. We started actually at 3 levels. I won't go through all of them because, well, there's no time, and you can really read them in the deliverables that we brought up. So take your time, and if you're interested, they are available on the SOUL website, and we can make them available to you, of course. Well, the first level is the sustainable urban mobility plan goals themselves. You must know them. What we then did is we tried to specify for each of the goals that are in the SUMP what kind of KPIs could you think about. And this is some of a few. We actually made 87 of them on different levels. So for instance, for the goal of a safe and secure urban mobility system, you could have a KPI that is the number of injuries and fatalities. And you could have a target. For this one, it's very easy. You want to bring it as close to 0 or as close to as possible as 0. Now, this kind of KPI is a typical example of an outcome KPI because it tells you something about the result of this KPI and not on the process which you need to get to this. For instance, a process KPI would be the speed reduction on roads from 50 to 30 kilometers per hour or something like that. And then what we finally did is we put some, we did an inventory of all data sources that are available to calculate actually this KPI. And that could be something that is already in place, but it could also be something that we need to gather, or maybe there's even not a reliable data source at all for it. And then there is some work to do, of course. Well, I just told you about the first level of this framework. We have 2 other levels. One is on the operation and planning side of the hub. This really goes on what you can see of the performance of the hub itself, and this really ties in nicely with the larger sustainable urban mobility goals, because if you kind of sum all this operation and planning KPIs up, they should really contribute to some of the sustainable urban mobility goals. And then the final level is on the performance and operation of the decision support system, which is part of the SOUL project, of course, itself. And they are more like focused on what does the decision support system need to do, how does it do it, and what are functionalities, and how can we evaluate these functionalities. So that was already quite some work, but we didn't stop over there. What we then did is we had this big list of all the KPIs that were a bit of a general framework for all cities. So it's not city specific. Other cities could be applying this for themselves. And we then did a round along the 3 cities in the SOUL consortium, which is Milan, Barcelona, and ourselves, to see what are actually their goals for now, but also in the future. So you see here a bit of an example of Milano, and you see what kind of goals they have for 2019, 2022, and 2026. Now, I will tell you something finally about the results that we found. And this is very interesting because it tells you something about what we need to do still to make this a bit richer, and what we could do in order to get this data that is needed to evaluate the goals and KPIs. So what you can see in these pictures is that there are actually 87 KPIs that are that we found for now, and 22 are activity-based, 27 are outcome-based, and 38 are outcome-based. And this actually kind of corresponds with the levels of the hub. So for the SUMP goals, they are mainly being outcome-driven. The performance goals of the decision support system are mostly activity-based, and the hub operation is mainly a mix between these two. And then we did, of course, the inventory of the data sources that are available to look at this decision support system. And you could see three things. Actually, 42 of the 87 KPIs are dependent on manual inventory right now. And another 9 can best be measured by questionnaires or specific stakeholders. So then there's 36 remaining, and they are the ones that are really, well, let's say, readily available for implementation in an automated system such as SOL, the SOL DSS, because they are there are already data sources available from various parties in the hub system. So these are the ones that we could focus on in the future. Now, there's also some question, of course, on who has this data. And we looked at this also. And what you see is that mobility operators, they are the largest provider of data sources. There are 17 data sources that have that belong to the mobility providers. Now, you can also see that the total number of data sources is a bit larger than the number of KPIs. That is a result of some of the KPIs requiring multiple data sources actually to make them available. So I can end my presentation very within time. That's good. Finally, lessons learned and conclusions. Yeah, as you can see from the city specific tables, the SUMP goals are most widely adopted. But on the level of hub performance and operations, cities have basics covered, but very few hub-specific KPIs are yet formulated. So there's a clear need for cities to specify targets and evaluate hub performance. There's really some work to be done in that aspect. Now, we also found that the performance of the decision support system itself is kind of uncharted territory, so we should have some attention on that too, to make sure that we have good and valuable measurements of how this DSA actually works. And finally, there are some fragmentation of KPIs that we can find. We did some really extensive work in gathering all kinds of documents to see what are the KPIs for the cities and what are general KPIs. And we found a very lot of sources. And I'm sure that we didn't find all sources. So there might be more relevant KPIs that we actually missed. That's not a problem. But what we recommend is that if you go on with such a planning process that we would like to do in Eindhoven at least, and I guess the other cities would want to do that as well, that you really be able to adopt KPIs from the beginning of the process. So then if you do that, there must be, you will find some extra KPIs that you could adopt and integrate right away. So you don't have to put that extra effort in. So that was it. Thank you very much for listening. I still have some time for questions, but Laura, I thought you wanted to do that on the end of the presentation. Am I right?
Yes, of course. Unfortunately, that's for all. Niels has to leave for some institutional problem. What we can do is that if a question arises, I can transmit them to you, and then we can answer one by one to the question to the cities of Eindhoven. I will keep to have. I prefer to keep the question at the end of the webinar.
Yeah. Okay.
So thank you very much, Niels. And then we move from the north of Europe to the south of Europe, and we go to Barcelona, which is a big city. And so the topic that the city and the specific that Jordi Ortuño will deal with his presentation is the complexity of urban mobility hubs, and for sure, from that point of view, Barcelona has a lot to say on that point. So, Jordi, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Hi, hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear and see you. The presentation.
Okay, thank you. Hi, hello, everyone, and thanks for joining to this webinar. My name is Jordi Ortuño from Barcelona City Council, and it's my pleasure to be a part of this webinar. In my talk, I will cover three points. The first, we will have a look about hub and its complexity. In the second, it's as insights, reflection, thoughts about data. Finally, a quick overview about the three cities involved in the project, seeing the particularities of each of them. Giving you a big picture of hub complexity, so we could say that among all the services that cities or municipalities offer to the citizens, urban mobility is probably the most commented, studied, and maybe it's because this impact in society as in our lives as well as its complexity. So, and the complexity of hubs is due to not only for the big number of stakeholders and huge variety of them involved, but also for the capacity to influence it directly in our citizen behavior as an end user and making a notable impact in our cities. So, and also in terms of impact, the environmental footprint is clear, but also the opportunity to make faster, cheaper, and safer and cleaner urban mobility in our cities. It's also important to take into account that in hubs, new business models grows around urban mobility, where often the regulation and urban planning cannot go as fast as innovation goes usually. So as a consequence, some decisions are made in reactive way instead to be proactive. So we can find many examples in our cities: mobility as a service, car sharing, personal mobility vehicles, micro mobility. It's we could say that is a ecosystem for itself inside of urban mobility. So cities and public transport operators in its role as a public service needs to take care about this, creating the most appropriate conditions and helping in the adoption of these new modes of transport inside a hub with the markets that derive from this and promoting the cleaner modes of transport. So mobility hub understood as a physical place that offers different and connected.
Sorry, Jordi?
Yeah.
Were you supposed to run the presentation? Because
no. I am still in the same presentation, trying to give you a big picture of the complexity of mobility hubs. I am just ending this slide, just to say that moving to technology, this nowadays the ICT platforms are paramount in these hubs. and giving as a result data that becomes in these urban mobility hubs, as so often repeated, the new oil of mobility. But this is the show that we have made from Barcelona. I'm shared with you a lot of times. This is not only about data. It is clear that we are managing a big amount of data that today our systems are able to manage, and bigger than ever. And it seems that it will increase. And also we can move this data faster than ever thanks to communications, but also we must recognize that the most of data that we are collecting is by mode of transport, and there is still a lack when we are trying to get a big picture of the mobility system as a whole. So, and in addition, this data comes from different sources like sensors, cameras, wearables, so, and with different formats that make not easy to manage as a set. And if finally we are working for cities, citizens, and mobility planners and transport operators, so if they need to take a decision based on this data, it's mandatory to ensure from our side the reliability of and the value of this data. In terms of management, let me share with you only one example. For instance, to know which movements between the different modes of transport are evolving with its associated change of behavior, it will be paramount when we are planning demand and in urban mobility services. So, also, as my previous speaker and the previous speakers has commented, we need to act in unexpected situations and sometimes with previous experience. And so, in short, I will say that what we need, a part of data, is knowledge. And this knowledge can be provided by a DSS as SUL, as a project is. The current demand in urban mobility is well known for all of us, less operational costs, less congestion, faster travels, less pollutions, and to have the capacity to plan it in it's clear, and so for the reason we need more than data. I will say it ending this part about reflection about data, that SUL project is a common place where urban mobility planners, ICT professionals, data science joins and brings their expertise while they are we are working and pursuing the same objectives. So SUL, I think it's clear, is an excellent tool to help us to continue giving better, more affordable and equitable services in a city where at the end citizens and cities should be the first beneficiary. And ending my presentation, so regarding the three pilot sites of the cities, we could say that the most of cities today we are challenging the same challenge. We are pursuing the same challenge: sustainable economic growth, efficient use of resources, improve the quality of life. But although most of them are common in our cities, each city has its particularities, and the more important, to my opinion, is different priorities, because they are in different stages evolving their systems. So let's see a quick overview of the three urban mobility hubs, with the purpose that despite that we will use the same common system, SUL, its particularities must be taken into account. In Milan, to name some of the relevant features, I wouldn't want to forget any of them, but just to say that it's the second Italian station in terms of size. It's crucial access point for the city around the hub and for fashion shopping streets. Milan has the central station is served by regional trains, local trains, national. From these stations are also available connection to Milan airports, and it's also an interchange spot for buses. So we will say that this is a very complex but also completed hub, the city of Milan. In Barcelona, Plaça Catalunya is the city centers, is one of the most important mobility hub in the city and offers different mobility services under and above the square. And they have many medium distance trains and metro and local train and many bus routes. It's also possible to find some bus services such as airport or tourist line.
Jordi,
sorry.
We are not able to see your presentation. You are still in the first slide. I think it's a problem of.
Yeah, we are still in the first slide.
Yeah. I think you are not showing the presentation. So only the PPT.
I'm sorry, because I am just about to end my presentation.
That was what I was saying before.
Yeah. But when you have invited me, I was in the first slide still, so it was in the correct slide in this moment.
Maybe try to share, to exit and enter once more with the presentation. Or by the way, the presentation will be made available. So if you want to conclude the presentation, then we will make it available to all the attendees.
Yeah. So just to say is that we are working in different cities, and in the case of Eindhoven, this is a city that has experienced a lot of economic, a big economic growth, and the hub doesn't exist. And regarding mobility, so they have the opportunity to learn about from the two other cities, Barcelona and Milan, and also take advantage from the DSS that they have the opportunity in Eindhoven to start from scratch. I'm sorry because I was completed. Sure that I was sharing my screen. I am seeing. So I have ended. This is all from my side. Sorry for not being sharing my slides.
Don't worry, Jordi. I think that the concept was anyway very clear and extremely important. Then I will give the floor to the city of Milan and specific to Dario Mertoli, that will wrap up the city perspective and needs on the smart mobility hub planning and definition. So Dario, the floor.
Yes, thank you, Laura. Just a moment, I share my screen. Okay, do you see my screen? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you, Laura. Good morning, everyone. I am Dario Mertoli, transport engineer and activity leader from City of Milan and AMAT for the SOL project. Today, we are dealing with about city's perspective and needs. The main contents are the description of the use cases, the description of the free mobility hubs for Milano, Barcelona, and Eindhoven, and the common needs and the pain and gain thanks to the DSS tool. The use cases are free. Two use cases used as data feeder for definition, testing, validation of DSS. Milano and Barcelona choose two existing mobility hubs in which DSS could be useful to optimize the hubs, while Eindhoven choose an area where a new multimodal mobility hub is being built. In this case, the DSS could be useful to plan a new hub. So the choice of the hub are Plaza Catalunya for Barcelona, Stazione Centrale for Milano, and then a new area, Park and Ride in Genenberg Park in the south of Eindhoven. The hub's area definition has been carried out in two stages. The detailed description of three mobility hubs, identifying the transport offer, regulatory constraints, eventual barrier to DSS development, and each cities are described the mobility hub through a table identifying some aspects to define the state of the art in its evolution. So for Milano Centrale is located in the northeast of the cities, represent the second Italian region for size, number of passengers, and was opened in 1931. Represents, like Jordi said before, the strategic interchange point for the several public transport lines, national, international railway operators, airport shuttle for the main airport of Milano, an area reserved to the taxi and the car rental, the presence of the several shared mobility providers, and so on. In the area in front of Milano Centrale, there is the Pirelli skyscraper, headquarters of some office of Regione Lombardia, 3 consulate, 2 schools, and several hotels, restaurants, grocery stores. In this slide, we report the list of mobility services and non-mobility services present in the area, like the line of metro, public transport, the companies for shared mobility, like the car sharing, scooter sharing, bike sharing, and micromobility, and non-mobility service like luggage storage, car rental, car parking area, assistance room, shopping area, and post office. So we define a table in which represents some thematics or aspects like transport services, public and private users, and hub facilities like capacity, signage, accessibility, security, shops, considering the current value and 2 expected targets were identified. That's 2022 that represents the end of the SUMP project, and 2026 that represents the Winter Olympic Games in Milano and Cortina. So for Barcelona, represents one of the most important hub in terms of mobility. It was built in 1889 and is connected with the main roads like Paseo de Gracia, Rambla Catalunya, and etc. Like Milano Centrale, represents a strategic interchange point thanks to the many bus routes, airport shuttle, public bike services, tourist line. Plaza Catalunya offer in addition different taxi stores, shared mobility companies, and the local, national, international train, and several activities and shops, tourist shops, and other services around the area. In this case, like Milano Centrale, we report the list of the mobility services and non-mobility services, like libraries, pubs, theater, pharmacies, commercial center, bank, and etc. So in this case, we report the aspects of the Milano Centrale, and for the columns 2019, 2022, and 2024 that represent the SUMP scenario for Barcelona. Last but not least, the new area in the south of Eindhoven, the Park and Ride Genenberg Park, near the main roads access into the city center. This area will be connected to the high-quality public transport line, represents a great place to shift from private to public or shared mobility solution, will be considered lots of parking spots, area for shared bikes and scooters, and other activities have been built in around the area. In this case, we define some aspects and identify a multiple factor useful to define performance parameters for the mobility hub operation. Why the mobility hub? Because R represents an important place for short-term and long-term development of urban transport system, complex environments for planning, design, management. For the city's perspective, the need to develop customized features in the hub infrastructure and service. From the system perspective, the need for higher integration of various transport and non-transport services in the hub. In the mobility hub, there are multitude of contextual factors like the different transport modes, many infrastructure components, multiple stakeholders, multiple decision goals, etc. And in order to make hub smarter, more inclusive, more connected, is needed enhance workability, facilitate backability, ensure a vibrant mixed use environment like retail, public space, ensure safety for the city, for citizens, provide wayfinding, and so on. And so is needed to use a DSS tool to be applied for supporting decision-making processes in the hub planning. The analysis of the three cities hub necessities leads to identification of a common ground regarding the city needs that should be covered by DSS. And despite of each city has a particular hub ecosystem, we identify three common needs. That's the integration of data from different data sources and data providers. In fact, one of the functional requirement is to ensure the data interoperability, create a data collection system in order to provide information about the hub performance in terms of user, transport, supply, traffic, public transport. Other need is to have access to a DSS tool to visualize the hub performance thanks to KPIs, as the KPIs may be different from each city based on their SUMP priorities, and DSS should be able to adapt these KPIs to different cities or users. And the need to have a DSS tool to support decision in the medium and long term in order to become essential components for the SUMP guidelines. So if one side we have pain in a decision and decision-making process, such as defining a common goal, missing data interoperability, new mode of traveling, access to the information, the gains through the support of so DSS are clear communication to users, help to report current situation, evaluate app performance, and reduce the decision process cost. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much, Dario, for your contribution, for the information that you share with us. Then we move further in the sense that we have seen the KPIs, we have seen the problems that the cities faces and so on and so forth. But there is another important point that should be tackled, and for that I thank Andrei Benarek from Skoda DigiLab for his availability, that are regulation and barriers when we are working with smart mobility apps. So Andrei, the floor is yours.
Good morning, everybody. I tried to share my presentation. Yes. As Laura said, we focused on analyzing of rules and regulations related to mobility hubs and to the DSS. As we can see on this picture, on this slide, cities are very regulated. We can see a system of streets that were designed. So when we talk about cities at the moment, and let's say also about innovations as mobility hubs, then we have to bear in mind that everything is interconnected via common legal system. So, so we wanted to analyze which regulations must be respected when we design and prepare and implement mobility hubs, and also how the mobility hubs in the end influence the regulations and the legal framework. At the moment, the situation about mobility as a service and mobility hubs is quite confused, because the legal framework is in the process of creation. We have examples from various countries, like France act on mobility. Israel is quite active in the regulation. We have a bunch of regulations from EU, like GDPR, AI regulations. Then we have like very big topic like open data, parking system, or micromobility, let's say almost like reduction, I would say. And if anybody in the city and in this, if the responsible person in the city want to decide about mobility hubs, then he or she need to know which legal framework in which steps must be respected. We have also good and bad practices to the mass. For example, car sharing is being quite popular among end users, but also among city representatives, because it contributes to the targets like less cars in the city, less polluted air, etc. On the other hand, we have, like, I would say, bad practice in kick scooter sharing, because the using and operation of e-scooters is not, let's say, regulated enough. So parking of e-scooters is quite messy. It's chaotic. So there are no rules. So it looks like that e-scooters is a wonderful solving of last mile in the cities. But on the other hand, without a proper, let's say, rules how to use the e-scooters, then it's quite complicated, this innovation in the city ecosystem. Our approach reflects 4 levels of public administration. So we have the, let's say, highest is common EU level for all European countries. So GDPR, AI, CO2 limits. So we focused on how these topics influence the decision support system and mobility hubs. Then we have state level, mainly ICT infrastructure, charging system for EVs, fire security rules, tendering process. Tendering in general is very, very important, because we know that a lot of projects in the end can be stopped by the tendering process. Of course, construction, act on construction. City level, cities generally regulate typically street equipment. So we have street equipment standards, and the mobility hubs must respect these street equipment standards. Then we have, for example, a lot of, let's say, hubs or stations are at the moment in the historical area, which are under various levels of protection. And again, so if we build a mobility hub in a historical area, then we have to bear in mind that we have to respect this protection process. So, for example, the charging stations for EVs must be, let's say, designed in accordance for this historical place. And of course, the last level is like stakeholders, typically energy providers, rescue teams, fire brigades, etc. And these must be also, let's say, put into the pot. So when we talk about the rules and regulation framework. So the cities and city representatives will find in the sole material, let's say, a list of documents which should be respected and which should be also included into the decision system to mobility hubs. Of course, city planning context is important. Then, as I already said, public tenders procedure and the rules to link to this. Cities bigger than or with more inhabitants than 50,000 people must have SUMP, sustainable urban mobility plans. And also the link between mobility hubs and SUMPs must be respected and somehow, let's say, covered by the decision process. Then we have mass regulations. So again, in the document, mass regulations are, let's say, described and how these regulations are linked to mobility hubs. Parking, of course, the big topic is EV charging infrastructure. EVs are, let's say, more and more popular, and the amount of EVs in cities is growing rapidly. And so there is a strong push on charging infrastructure. So how to, let's say, build this charging, where to put it, how many chargers, if there are, let's say, possibility for fast charging, if there is not enough grid, so some kind of storages of energy. Data and ICT regulations, it's connected to Car2X, or vehicle to infrastructure. So mobility hubs are able to generate a lot of data from the, let's say, sensors on place, but also from the vehicles which are coming and leaving the mobility hub. And all these data should be, let's say, somehow covered by, and the management of the data should be done in a proper way. Smart mobility implementation, it's quite linked to data. And the last point is open data for mobility. So let's say how to, leverage opening and sharing of data thanks to mobility hubs. So that's all from my side. And if you have any question, then via Laura, I'm open to, let's say, discuss the topic in details. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andre. This is an extremely important point in the sense that we can have all the innovation we want, but if regulation are against this innovation, then we cannot implement it in any way, in any place. So let's close this webinar with a final presentation from Professor Mladenovic from Aalto University, because after the work that you have seen and that we have shared with you today, we arrive at the definition of the framework of action of the DSS that could be used by municipality. So Milos, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Laura, and thank you, colleagues from around Europe for the various important points that you already brought up. So let's zoom in into this last part. So we have to, of course, understand the decision context if we're going to be talking about any kind of decision support. Yeah, so supporting decisions requires really understanding the decision context, and we have already seen a range of different challenges there. At the core of this being the fact that decisions that we're making about urban mobility hubs are basically distributed. It's the classical so-called problem of many hands. That you, of course, have spatial temporal scales are different, and then, of course, stakeholders are also different in that case. So on top of the problem of different scales and many hands, you also, of course, have a lot of uncertainties in making decisions. Uncertainty has always been there. I guess nowadays with COVID-19, we're seeing it in front of our eyes more obviously, let's say. So of course we have a lot of other uncertainties emerging from technologies or from the fact that this is just the hub in itself is a large and complex system in itself. There are of course many services and then large number of users with different kinds of requirements there. So but this is not the whole story, of course. We need to kind of focus on understanding what is the key to making effective decisions. And eventually, the classical two aspects that we need to return back to and really understand is, on one side, many decisions in urban mobility go back to the old proverb, you cannot have the cake and eat it. Yeah? So you have to prioritize goals. You can't just have goals as wish lists and every goal being of equal importance. You need to say that something is more important, something is less important. Not, it doesn't mean that you will drop a goal completely, but you have to rank. Yeah. And then on the other side, you have to understand that urban mobility and urban mobility hubs in particular are, by their definition, complex, and complexity in this case means that whatever happens on the user level is not necessarily the only thing you need to understand. You also need to understand the system level and then vice versa. Yeah. So understanding aggregate patterns is good, but it will never lead to behavioral change, and then behavioral change will never be properly done if you don't understand the kind of the larger system and structure aspects. So you need both sides of the coin in that case. So then, if we zoom in further in kind of what again, decisions here, but not just decisions as isolated decisions, we need to understand them as decision processes. So that's the kind of the focus over here. We need to be supporting processes, not just kind of isolated decisions. And usually, in the past, we have been mostly focusing on supporting isolated decisions. And there are many decisions like that. You can see some of the aspects over here. So, okay, how do you connect? How do you improve schedule for buses and trains? How do you improve, for example, schedule coordination? Or how do you evaluate impacts on particular groups of people? Or how do you even provide access to multiple parties? Share things. So we have a lot of tools. Yeah, it's not that we don't have tool over situation. We do have a lot of tools, but they're not necessarily taught from the perspective of decision processes. They have usually been taught from the perspective of sort of isolated decisions. And that's where we kind of turn back to the study that we have also been conducting in this project as well. What's the problem here? So why are these tools really not addressing what we should have with regard to urban mobility hubs? And we go back to two main aspects, which is usability and usefulness. Usability is something that you might immediately associate with a tool just not working properly according to what you would expect it to do functionally. Basically, kind of, there is no button That would be one simple example for what you want to do too. Or sometimes it just doesn't want to accept certain resolution of data or certain data files even, or just takes too much time to calculate something, so it slows down the decision process, or black boxes the decision process, and so on. That's the usability gap. But of course, on the other side, we also have even more important, in some cases, usefulness gap, that sometimes these tools have not necessarily been thought of to be applicable to specifically urban mobility hubs. They have been thought of to be applicable to many different things, but that often means that they are not actually capable of dealing with a lot of these tasks around urban mobility hubs that are not necessarily applicable in other domains of urban mobility planning. And then at the end of the day, they have to be thought of, as I said, in larger set of processes, where for processes, communication is very, very important, especially across multiple stakeholders. So that's where we decided to kind of focus the decision support system that we have been working on for the past year. So on one side, going back to the beginning, we of course have to understand that this is about prioritization of goals and understanding this different perspectives of system level and hub, hub user level. That's definitely one important point. Another one is basically we have to account for the fact that when we have multiple stakeholders and they bring to the table different kinds of knowledges, we need to provide access for these different kinds of knowledges to enable learning of those people individually, but also people learning from each other. This goes back to the point of communication, discussion. So tools should not be there to hinder communicative planning, because that's something we need to be able to have if we're going to resolve some of those conflicting goals at the end of the day. Yeah, this is why at the end of the day, mobility is also a political process, one way or another, that requires democracy. Of course, we talk about a lot of data, and that's sometimes can also be as much as a benefit as much as a burden. So we have to focus on what is actually useful data, yeah, that we should be having or analyzing. What is the new knowledge that it will actually bring to the table? On top of that, something that we're trying to teach, of course, also our transport engineers nowadays, is that they need to be comfortable with iterations. They need to be comfortable with constantly questioning problem and solution. This requires design thinking, so being able to kind of iterate through this, not locking the problem and the solution definition as well. And then the last point there is that if we talk about making decisions about urban mobility hubs as some kind of long-term learning, for any kind of long-term learning, you need process memory, so you need to be able to understand what's been done before. When you move to the next process, so then you don't start again from scratch every time, and then that requires some kind of understanding of different points in the process of decision making. When did you converge into making a decision? Because eventually you can't just also iterate all the time between problem and solution. You have to have some kind of a deadline. You have to make a decision within given constraints, but then next time around you shouldn't start again from zero. You should start from where you made a decision last time. At least have that knowledge available, especially if people leave organizations and new people come in and so on. So on a technical level, we have been working on a framework for a web-based system that is supposed to have different modules. And you can see these modules represented here. So one module about goals and prioritizations of these goals, one module about different kinds of data sources available, validating them and making decisions about those. Two pairing modules about understanding the system level, and one module about understanding user perspectives, especially to different personas and then different groups of people, and then 2 different modules about on the level of actions, of what kind of actions or decisions, as we said, overall could be there done regarding policy, planning, design, operations, different kinds of levels, to also have a database of actions over time, and then 1 module to actually provide this kind of a dashboard, access to different users, eventually also the process memory and version control aspects. So that's how we have envisioned this decision support system, given all those things that we have been working on for the past year. So thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Milos. Thank you very much to all. I have 2 questions. One for you, Milos. Maybe I make it immediately. You have spoke about modular design and modular DSS design. Could you maybe elaborate further on the benefits that this type of design can have in the definition of the DSS?
Yeah. So too often we have been thinking about softwares that are just going to be one big machine that is going to solve everything, trying to model the whole city. And so on. So if we think about modular aspects, and modularity in itself is something that has its benefits in scalability, but let's say there are two main benefits. We have been talking about, even in this case, with 3 different hubs. There are a lot of similar points, but there are always particular differences in particular context. So with different modules, you can then answer, or you can be transferable to different contexts of different cities. So transferability is definitely an important point there. And then the other part is that if you make modules and you don't make some kind of a classical linear definition of a software that oftentimes we have been relying on in the past, it allows you to do this kind of design thinking where you can jump back from goals to validation, but then to kind of users, but then back to goals, and then from goals to actions, and then back from actions to previous data that you have there available. So it allows you to actually have this more iterative and then eventually communicative planning process. So that would be those 2 points.
Thank you very much for your clarification. One question to Dario Mertoli. So you spoke about the hub and the hub of Milan. So in specific, when now we are speaking about Stazione Centrale di Milano, which were the elements of choice of the hubs?
Yes, we consider, thanks to the cooperation of the other colleagues from Barcelona and Owen, we consider some aspects like the accessibility, the public space, the attractiveness of the hub, the number of public transport lines, the presence of the airport shuttle, in order to define a specific hub in which DSS could be useful to optimize the hub for specific events like fashion design, design week, fashion week, or for the Winter Olympic Games in 2026. For this reason, Milano Centrale represents a strategic interchange point, both the users, the citizens of Milano, but both for the tourists, and thanks to the airport shuttle for the main airport of Milano. For this reason, we considered some aspects of this accessibility, number of users, etc.
Okay, thank you very much, Dario. I do not see any more questions on this webinar. I inform all the attendees that the presentations will be available, and as well the registration of the events. So if you think you have lost something, then you will be able to recap and catch up with it. And so I thank you everyone. I thank you the consortium of Seoul that worked a lot in this 2020, and the availability of the speakers of this webinar. As well, the availability of the attendee, and I hope we were able to transmit you and to share with you some useful thoughts and information. So thank you everybody. I close down the event now, and see you soon on YouTube if you want to receive the webinar itself. So thank you so much to everyone. Bye.
Thank you.
Everyone.
Bye.
Bye. Bye-bye.